Today I'm revisiting the Catskill Fly Fishing Center and Museum. Several years ago I made another video about this, but today I want to do a more extended one and explain more about what you saw in the first one. I have another reason for doing this too. It's a very special video and it's in honor of Mary Dee Clark. Mary died this year, January 27th, and today they are holding a very special memorial in her honor. But first, let's take a good look at the museum. Forest and Stream was founded by Charles Halleck in 1873, and by the time it canceled in 1930, it was the ninth oldest magazine still issued in the U.S. Dave Brandt was an acknowledged master of Catskill-style flies. He was a noted inventor, conservationist, and an instructor at the Wolf's world-famous fly fishing school for more than 30 years. The Catskill Fly Fishing Center and Museum is a non-profit educational organization that's dedicated to preserving America's fly fishing heritage. Its mission extends to teaching future generations of fly fishermen and women and protecting the fly fishing environment. With a beaver tail, no less. This center operates not only as a museum and an education center, but also an environmental research center. This center collects, cares for, interprets, and displays the most amazing collection of angling equipment, art, and artifacts in a way that explains the traditions and techniques of the fly fishing sport. As I look at these beautiful bamboo rods now encased in glass and will probably never be used again, I can't help but think about the rod that I inherited from a very good friend. I'll leave a card above so you can check it out a little closer, but it's a rod that was made in the 1950s explicitly for this woman, and I still use it to this day. A little history about the museum. It opened in 1983 as a storefront in Roscoe, New York, and by 1986, the museum enhanced the resources and facilities, enabling them to consolidate activities, establish environmental camps for children, and plan for the future. On May 28, 1995, it opened at its current location on a 35-acre parcel in Livingston Manor along the banks of the famous Willowweemawk Creek. That same year, it received title to Junction Pool up in Roscoe, which is the headwaters of the main stream of the Beaver Kill. The heyday of the bamboo fly rod production was approximately a 75-year period from the 1870s to the 1950s, when fiberglass became the predominant material. In Britain, the bamboo fly rod was actually called a split cane rod. Angling student George Parker Holden, following the writings of Thaddeus Norris, wrote his first book in 1919 called Steamcraft. Fly fishing and fly tying are ancient arts and are referenced to fly fishing, which appears as early as 200 AD. The greatest advancements to the tradition were made during the 19th century in England, and during this time innovations in fishing rods, reels, and lines brought more people to the sport. Mary Detty Clark was daughter of one of the preeminent Catskill fly tying families. She was the last of the original Catskill fly tyers. Her first contribution to the family's fly shop was to sell earthworms by the dozen. Later, she learned fly tying from her parents, Walt and Winnie Detty. Mary had exquisite ability that marked her as a Detty. She showed great attention to detail and exacting methods. What is the oldest fly pattern? It's the soft hackle, and it's among the oldest group of flies, and the partridge in orange, the best known of the soft hackles, may be the world's oldest documented fly pattern. It first appeared in British literature in 1496. The first written record of fly fishing is attributed to the Roman author Claudius Aelianus, who lived 2,000 years ago. When he visited the far reaches of Rome's empire of what is now the Balkan nation of Macedonia, he observed the Macedonians using a unique way of fishing. Claudius wrote that they fastened red wool around a hook and fitted to the wool 2 feathers which grow under the cock's wattles, and which in color are like wax. Their rods were 6 feet long, and their line was the same length. Then they throw their snare, and the fish, attracted by the color, comes straight at it, thinking from the pretty sight to gain a dainty mouthful. When, however, it opens its jaws, it is caught by the hook and enjoys a bitter repast, a captive. The Characteristics of a Catskill Fly by Harry Darby. A good-sized hook, typically size 12 model perfect, peacock herl, a divided wing of lemon-colored mottled barbules of a wood duck flank feather, and a few sparse turns of an incredibly stiff, clean, glassy cock's hackle, mostly either blue or ginger. The wings and hackle are set back from the eye of the hook, leaving an unusually long, clean neck at the expense of a slightly shortened body. This puts a sustaining hackle so close to the point of balance that the fly rides over broken, turbulent water like a Coast Guard lifeboat, so nearly balanced that often the tail of hackle whisk, originally a little curlicue of several wood duck barbules, doesn't much touch the water at all. Fly fishing in the Catskills emerged around the 1890s when Theodore Gordon, the father of American dry fly fishing, began to notice that many of the trout he was wet fishing for upstream in the Neversink River, a 55-mile-long tributary of the mighty Delaware, would take to flies floating just above the surface of the water. This prompted him to write to the famed British dry fly fishing authority of the time and author of Floating Flies and How to Dress Them, Frederick M. Halford. Halford began an exchange of a series of letters on the subject of dry fly fishing with the American angler Gordon, which were adapted by Gordon and led to the development of this famous dry fly fishery. In his response, Halford also sent Gordon some dry flies, and so it began. Gordon quickly realized that since Halford's flies imitated British insect species, the technique needed to be adapted for Catskill waterways. He set out to design and tie his own dry fly patterns, which would mimic Native American insects, developing the American School of Dry Fly Fishing in the process. Paul Jorgensen was a Danish man who moved to the United States in the 1960s, and he began working a career as an engineer. His passion for fly tying not only led to often being called the best fly tyer in the world, but also eventually abandoning his career as an engineer and dedicating himself to full-time fly tying, writing, and teaching. The names and explanations of some of the people that I've given you so far are part of the Catskill Fly Fishing Center and Museum Fly Fishing Hall of Fame. 2023 inductees were John Atherton, Arnold Gingrich, creator of Esquire magazine, Will Godfrey, and Frank Mealy. Most notable, as of October 2022, was Samuel and Solon Phillip, American rod builders who advanced the craft of bamboo rod making to high art and established the U.S. as the premier maker of refined cane rods. The Catskills are a wellspring of fly fishing in America. Legendary figures who practiced their craft here made the sport what it is today. The state of wonder that Theodore Gordon and other writers, artists, and naturalists found in this place would inspire generations of anglers. The Catskills remain the epicenter of fly fishing today. Fly tyers and rod builders of the region were equally central to the story. Patterns known around the world, the Quill Gordon, the Hendrickson, the March Brown, came to life in these waters. Catskill-style flies were popularized by the acclaimed tyers that made their homes here. Rube Cross, the Darbys, and the Dettys, among others. Split cane rods built by H.L. Leonard and his disciples would angle countless native brook trout and later the rainbows and browns that are the mainstay of Catskill fishing today. The Wolf Gallery is where they're holding Mary's Memorial today. I'm not going to film everything, but I'm going to give you a quick look and maybe do a little bit of the museum. Joan Wolfe is considered the first lady of fly fishing. She pioneered elements of fly fishing and casting that are now essential to the sport. In 1978, Joan and her husband Lee moved to Lou Beach, New York, where they opened a fly fishing school. It never fails that a railroad is always part of my life, and what we're seeing here is the empty roadbed of the New York, Ontario and Western Railway, also known as the O&W. It was founded in 1868 and the last train ran from Norwich, New York to Middletown, New York in 1957. To the Mountains by Rail is a book written by Manville B. Wakefield where he chronicles the Catskill Mountain resorts in Sullivan County and the O&W Railway that carried visitors from New York City to the mountains. This is the Willowwemoc Creek. It's 27 miles long and it flows almost directly west from a few miles due north of the hamlet of Willowwemoc through Livingston Manor and Roscoe, where it joins the Beaverkill at Junction Pool. Brown trout are stocked from the Catskill Mountain Fish Hatchery, located a few miles north of the Bruce, New York. Brook trout thrive here in the upper reaches of the stream, and rainbow trout do very well also. Where I stand now is the lower part of the stream that's between Livingston Manor and Roscoe. It parallels New York State Route 17, also known as the Quickway. As you drive along 17, there are incredible views of not only the Catskill Mountains, but the stream itself. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this. The next time you find yourself in New York State, take a trip to the Catskills. You won't regret it.